Boom. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Hey. So, welcome to Wake the Fuck Up Wednesday. What is it? Oh my gosh, it's already like late May. That is so crazy, isn't it? I can't believe it. Anyway, I was super stoked about this weekend. I had an amazing dance party. Hey, Jules. I had an amazing dance party on Sunday outside in the backyard. It was super fun. And I realized I need to get way better speakers because I had like my little Bose speaker that we got at Costco, and it was like I had to like hold it above my head to like really feel the vibe. Anyway, I hope you're all having an amazing spring. Okay, today the topic is how to forgive ourselves. Now, I want to preface this with the fact that forgiveness is a very loaded term, right? Um, so I was raised super Catholic. I was raised going to confession on a regular basis. If you don't know what that is, it's like this little booth. Like y'all have maybe seen my sound booth in Hawaii. It's like this little booth, and you go in, and then there's a divider, and then like you're on one side, and then the priest is on the other side. And if you're raised in a family like I was, you start doing that at like a really young age. And then you go in and the priest is like, well, what have you done wrong, basically? And let me just preface this with some people love the practice of confession and find it very helpful and cleansing. Awesome. That was not my experience. My experience was oftentimes I showed up because I'm like 7 or 8, right? And they're like, how have you sinned? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I don't know. And so I made stuff up. I'd be like, because I felt like I was supposed to have showed up having done bad things. But, as a kid, I actually had a pretty good self, like concept of self esteem. Oh my gosh, hold on, y'all. It says my computer's about to die and I have to plug it in. Hold on, I'm going to be right back. I'm coming to you, Wake the Fuck Up Wednesday, lovers. All right, I've got the plug here. Thank goddess I saw it. All right, there we go. I think we're good. So I kind of, like, as a kid, I had a pretty good self esteem. Like, I didn't think everything I did was like fucked up and wrong. So when I'd go to confession and they'd be like, well, what'd you do wrong since the last time you were here? And I'd be like, I don't fucking know. So I would just be like, I stole a pencil, which I didn't even do. Right? Because I was like, for the most part, I don't lie. I'm not a mean kid or whatever. So then I found I was like making shit up, but also I was hyper focused on what I might be doing wrong. Right? So I do think there's an appropriate place for like reflection about how we're living our life, how our behavior impacts others, and all of that. But man, it was very interesting for me to have that experience. So, for a lot of people in Western culture, they may have a negative connotation with the word forgiveness. Like, it sort of implies that there's some badness there. But that's the whole point of what I'm going to talk about today. Why there isn't really that, okay? And why we need to really move away from this shame and self blame and regret into self compassion and self acceptance, really, would be a different word that you could use instead of self forgiveness, if that's a triggering one for you. Okay? All right. So, what I would love for you all to think about, what is something that you're having a hard time forgiving yourself for? Because there's a lot of reasons, right? Like we could say, like a common one is, oh, a parent died before I made amends, right? Or regretting how we parent and like scaring the shit out of our kids. And we're like, oh my gosh, now I'm really going to mess them up. Right? I have that sometimes with Maya. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like so bad that I'm like that I scared her when I like got mad, right? Like we're gonna totally fuck him up. Or maybe we had a partner that we hurt or betrayed or whatever it is, right? Or for some people, maybe their addiction got in the way of intimacy with their family and friends, right? Or buffering, and kind of buffering away, like wasted time, right? So, whatever it is, a lot of us carry at our core that there's this sense of being unforgivable, right? And that we are unworthy and unlovable. And, like, if you weren't raised in a household that sort of taught you that, you were born imperfect with this concept of like original sin and all that, you were in the West raised in a culture that was founded on that, right? So whether or not that was happening in your family, in the world you walked in, there is this concept that humans are born imperfect and that we will never be perfect until we like die, right? Um, and that is not what's going to be happening here today. Because today, I really want to help you understand the power of letting go, right? Because, like, what is forgiveness, right? For me, forgiveness is letting go of wishing that the past was different from it was. Oprah has a great quote about that. I talk about it in the podcast that's dropping tomorrow. But forgiveness is letting go of wishing that the past was different than it was and kind of like unloading the burdens so that you can move on, right? Move forward now. Because so often we get stuck, right? But the other thing I really want you to grok about forgiveness is that it is so directly related to our capacity to know joy, right? It's so important that we learn how to do this practice because if we are shitting on ourselves and full of self blame and shame, we are really missing out on a really rich part of life. And I'm all about you making the most of this one precious life, right? So, why is it so hard, right? Other than being surrounded by this concept that we're not perfect and not good enough and we never will be, right? Which is compounded when you grow up in a family that's highly judgmental and critical too, right? So, some of the concepts are like we feel that we deserve it, right? So we feel like I fucked up, I hurt somebody, and I deserve to feel shitty about it, right? I'm supposed to walk around feeling shitty about it. That's how I atone for having done something wrong, right? Um, we also have concepts of like, I I feel like if I don't feel shitty about it, I'm going to do it again. And my shadow side's going to come out and fuck people up all the time if I don't feel bad about it, right? Or we think that if I don't feel bad about it, I'm not going to evolve. If I never feel shame about something, how am I ever supposed to evolve? So some of us have these really deeply entrenched beliefs, right? And these beliefs keep us from really being able to forgive ourselves and then live fully. Okay? So I really want you to become aware. Do you have this story that you're supposed to suffer because of what you did and you're supposed to blame yourself forever and ever? Do you have this story that it is a form of punishment that you deserve? Or do you have this story that the only way you evolve is to feel shitty? Like, in Freedom School right now, we're talking about self-compassion. And in self-compassion, we really try to understand that we don't want to be motivated by self-criticism. We think like, oh, when I shit on myself, it drives me to do better and to be a better person. You know what we do know is that is a very fragile foundation. And it may work for a little bit, but the minute that we don't have external affirmation for that, the foundation crumbles and we feel worthless. true confidence, true self love, true seeing our inherent perfection, motivation coming from wanting to serve and better the world rather than wanting to improve ourselves, that is what creates really beautiful and effective service and outcomes in the world, right? Because self criticism keeps us small and holding us back because of fear, right? So, I want to remind you of the story of the dog with its leg trapped, right? We have the dog in the woods, somebody's walking along, and they go, oh, look at the little doggy. And they go up to it and goes, Arr! I hope I didn't scare you with that. But, and then they go, whoa, bad dog, right? And then they go, oh, wait, its foot is caught in a trap. And then, oh, their heart opens. They're still not going to go and pet the dog because they might get bit, but their heart has opened, right? So similarly, we need to remember that the reason we do things that hurt other people, if we really investigate, our leg is in a trap. So that doesn't mean it's an excuse. It doesn't mean it absolves us of responsibility for the consequences of our actions. But what it does mean is that we have self-compassion and we see like, oh, my leg was caught in a trap and I was experiencing suffering and pain and I lashed out, right? Or I made really bad choices. It helps us understand why. When we open to that instead of shaming, we can get to the root of like, why did that happen? That is what keeps us from repeating the same action, not the self-blame. In fact, when we are self-blaming and shaming, we stuff it down, it becomes a shadow side of us that we don't acknowledge or deal with. And then we're more likely to hurt people because we're not open to the ways in which our leg was trapped that led to that to begin with. Yeah? Okay. So the other thing to remember is that self-blame is something, the reason that we hold on to self-blame, even though it feels shitty, is self-blame is something that is protecting us from those deeper vulnerabilities of our leg being caught in a trap, of loneliness, failure, vulnerability, anger, rage, self-doubt, fear, unlovability, unworthiness, right? And those feel really shitty. And so we may say, I'd rather feel this self-blame and shame than that, right? So we've only got a few minutes left. The pod is long this week, so I highly recommend you listen to the pod that's going to drop. But I want to point out that, again, here we are with the first arrow and the second arrow. We have the first arrow of the pain of the suffering that we caused through our action, right? The consequences of our action. Every action has a consequence, a result, right? And so we may say, oh, I really wish I didn't do that, right? Now, that's the first arrow of the pain. And we can stop there. And we can take that and go, wow, what did I learn? Why did I do that? You know, how can I remediate the situation? But then instead we get the second arrow of the shame and the blame and all of that. And that is like this unnecessary suffering, right? It no longer becomes helpful information about maybe where our values were challenged or where we didn't act in integrity, you know? That first arrow kind of lets us know that, like, hey, I was out of alignment here. But the second arrow causes us unnecessary suffering. We don't get anywhere with that, right? So, how do we forgive ourselves then, right? First, we need to recognize that we're in this story of blame, right? And we need to sense that it's possible to contact that more vulnerable feeling that's underneath that, right? Like the actual feelings that are there. So, to be able to see our leg in the trap and just bring kindness there, right? So, I have two stories I want to tell, and I only have time to tell one. And I'm really trying to decide. Thich Nhat Hanh poem, Jack Kornfield. I'm going to do Jack Kornfield story. Um, he told a story to us in our training about a participant on a Vipassana retreat. He had a 10-day retreat, and they were having a lot of anxiety and depression coming up, and had been living with depression for a while actually. But in the meditation, we unearthed this stuff, right? And it had come up that he had this inner werewolf. And Jack kind of worked with him through this process to ask what the werewolf wanted. And when he let the werewolf out, which he was really scared of doing, it cuddled up on him and licked his heart. And then he opened up to a story about how when he was a boy, like 10 or 11 years old, I think, he'd been growing up in a rural Midwestern state, and they had a farm with lots of animals. And he talked about how he loved animals, just loved animals. And how when people were dropping off, when people would move or something, they would drop off animals at the farm, assuming that they would take care of them because they had all this space and all these other animals. And really, what would happen was his father would ask him to take the dogs out and shoot them. And he was only 10. He was like super young, right? And he said he just loved animals so much. And he said there were 14 of them. He remembered every single one. And I'm just like always so touched when I think of that story. And he said, how can I ever forgive myself for that? And so Jack had recommended that he do a ceremony, right? And so what he ended up doing was he went into the desert, because they were in the desert, I think Joshua Tree or something, and he took 14 stones and made like an altar. And he shared this with them, right? He said, this one, and see that rock there with the little one next to it? That's the mom and that's her puppy. And he said, I am going to volunteer in an animal shelter once a month for a year. I'm going to donate $5,000 to a fund to protect your people, right? And I'm so sorry I did this. I will never do it again. I was forced to do it, and I wish I hadn't, but I'm so sorry. And this is what I can do. So he opened up to the vulnerability underneath the self-blame. The self-blame, like really weighing him down with depression, right? And then underlying that, this tender-heartedness, this tenderness of his leg was in a trap. And then the process of feeling, acknowledging the suffering and what we did, right? And then, we can reconnect to our values, right? So I think of this as like, the four stages of cleansing and action, right? That we wish we hadn't done, right? So we acknowledge what we did and the consequences, right? We go back to our integrity and our values and our practices, like of mindfulness and of presence. Because usually when we're doing fucked up stuff, it's because we're not mindful or present in that moment of every impact that we could be having, right? Like every time I do a retreat, I take my lay vows again. I reconnect. Like, this is what is important to me. We try to remedy it, right? We try to correct the negative action if we can. And if we can't, we apologize, we make restitution, we amends, just like he did, right? The donation, the time. And then we resolve to not do it again. And a lot of people will say, I'll try not to do that again. Do or do not. There is no try, says Yoda, right? Part of that is, some people say, well, no, I'm just being realistic. because I probably will fuck up again. Okay, but look at your intention behind it. Think about it like for people that are into monogamy, I know not everyone is, but for people that are, look at the qualitative difference between, hey, we're monogamous, or hey, let's try to be monogamous. Like, what do you mean let's try? Right? So it's like you can tell that little word. We're monogamous. We're going to try to be monogamous. Like there's already the window for that to come in, right? It's sort of like when we talk about something that maybe we can see more objectively, like starting a business. We have to be that person who believes it's possible in order for it to be possible. I can't say, I wonder if my business will do well. I wonder if I'll start a business. I'll try to start a business. No, the business will not come. The way it happens is that we commit to the action. So similarly here, we commit to showing up in a way that we're going to be proud of in the future, right? Like we have a sense of resolve. I'm going to do this, right? So when we can, without shame or self-blame, just say, yeah, I did that. And this was the consequence. That can be hard, right? But it's important. Then remember, our legs are trapped. We may think, I was just being a dick, right? Like, like my leg wasn't trapped. I was just being selfish. Look under there. Your leg was trapped. Why were you being selfish? What in there drove you to show up in a way that you're not proud of? If that was who you were, you wouldn't have any guilt or shame about it, right? There was something that is letting you know that that was out of alignment. And there's a reason. I really do believe that humans act from what they have resources for, right? So we acknowledge that we're in a place of suffering and that created suffering, right? And then we do what we can to make amends. And then, my friends, then we let go, right? We let go of the burden, right? There's a sage that said, don't push anyone, including yourself, out of your heart, right? Because you are worthy. You are lovable. You are 100% unconditionally lovable. I know it may not seem like that, right? At times, but you are. It's time to start believing that so that we can move past, the self-blame and the shame and towards self-forgiveness, okay? Okay, my friends, that's what I got for you today. Got nothing but love for you, baby. Okay, so go out there, find something that you might be feeling a bit guilty about or having that shame around, and really commit yourself to trying to forgive and start in those steps of understanding the pain that may have caused that action, right? Recognize how it's so not useful to be stuck in the self-blame, and move through those steps so that you can free yourself, right? Okay. Mwah! You all have an amazing rest of your week. And if you want to join Freedom School, join freedomschool.com. We are open. We would love to have you in there. We're doing self-compassion this month. Magical. Bye, my friends.